Okay, this video is going to show you how to set up your storage class. Now this is going to be used to keep track of values across web pages. So for instance, when you log in, you're going to want to keep hold of the ID number for a user, so that when you add in new photos or uploading files or doing orders, you've got the user's ID without having to mess about continually. Okay, and you'll also want to keep track of like what their name is and what their restriction level is, whether they're a normal user or an administrator. Now we're going to store this in a class. Okay, so we're going to go over to web project. You see I've got my data one on the screen here, and I'm going to right click on that and I'm going to say add. What you mustn't do is right click on the solution, because that'll go horribly wrong. Do it on the project bit. So right click, add. Oh, pick the wrong one. Do it again. Add new item, and we want another class, and I'm just going to call it storage. Okay, so make sure class is highlighted there. Right, this one is going to need access to information about the current web page activity. So we need to actually inherit here from a standard web page. Oops. Dot page. Okay. That should go blue the page if that's worked properly. Okay, so it just means we'll get access to information about current web session, which is important because that's what we're going to do. Now we're going to store all our information ultimately in what we call session variables, and these are just values that the web server can persist. Okay, but we're going to give a nice easy way using properties, class properties, to access these, to set and retrieve values from them. Now if you've looked at the template, you'll see examples of this, but I'm doing this from scratch. So I'm going to create a property, and it's going to be a public property, public static, and it's going to hold an integer value, because this is going to be for the user ID. So I'm going to call this user ID. Okay, properties of what we call getters and setters. So we want to set up a getter, put braces, and a setter. And what this allows us to do is when we say just put user ID in an expression or in a bit of code, it'll use the get to get what the user ID is. And when we say set, that's when we say like user ID equals 5, that will use the set command. Okay, so we'll do the set one first because that's the easiest one to do. So we need to put this HTTP context, use the picker because these things have got horrendous names, really long, and we want current, which means is the current session. Now we need some unique name for this, and I'm going to put them at the top in some comments in a minute. So I'm going to call this, I'm just going to put SE in front of it, and this is internal to this. Nothing else in the system needs to know what these names are. And I'm going to call this a UID. Okay, and we're going to set that to the value that's been given. So when we say equals and put a number, that gets treated as value. Okay, don't worry too much about that. So that's the storage for that. What we're now going to do is try and retrieve. Now this might go wrong. We might end up with a null object, which will throw an error, which we don't want to mess about with. So what we need for that, remember from when we talked about this, runtime errors can be caused by things that are outside your control, usually to do with storage, okay, files and things, and this is a similar thing. So we're going to use try and catch. So we're going to create a try block, and then we're going to have a catch block. And for the catch block, we're just going to give a default value. Now for this, I'm going to say -1, and that will allow me to check. So if I've got a user ID of -1, that means there is no user logged in. Okay, and I can test for that. I could create a constant referring to -1 if I wanted to, but I'll leave that up to you. You can do that. So I'm just going to put a comment on there so I know. So that's going to be default value is no session active. Okay. Right. What we're going to try and do is grab hold of this value and store it. And it's going to come from this location. Okay, so I'm going to copy that, but that's an object and we need to cast it to an integer, so I'm just going to say in front of that in brackets int semicolon, stop it moaning. Okay, so I'm doing it in two. I could have done this in one line, but I'm doing it in 2 steps just to make it clearer. Okay, so what I've got I've got a user ID property. If I try and assign a value to it, it'll store it in this hidden session variable. If I try and read it, it'll retrieve it from this session variable. Okay, keeping this simple. So I'm just going to put a comment on that. Holds current user ID. Okay, I'm going to create another one, and that's going to hold the name of the user. I'm just going to call that one name, and it's going to have exactly the same format as this with one slight change. So I'm just going to copy the gets and sets from the user ID one, paste them into this one, make sure I've got it in between the braces. So I'm going to have to come up with a new name, so I'm going to say session name, and this is obviously going to be a string, so I need to change that type to string. There's 2 types of string, but they're essentially the same. There's a capital letter one and there's one that goes in pale blue and the lowercase one. Okay, so we'll change that to name and return name. Remember, that is lowercase, so that isn't the same as that. Okay, don't put an uppercase letter. In fact, I'm going to change it to S to stop you doing that, because I know you're going to do that. Okay, our default value for this should be either an empty string or a null string. So it's up to you. I'm gonna do it that, and I can test to see if it's empty later on. So I need to make sure that I store the value in se name in the set part. Okay, I'm going to create another one because I want to keep track of, you don't have to do this, but I'm going to keep track of, and in further videos I'm going to show you this, I'm going to keep track of access level. So this is a string I'm going to use, so I just need to change the session name. I'm going to put level, so I'm going to spell it the same there, and I don't actually need to change anything else. So I've got in here storage for a user ID, storage for a name, and remember this is persistent storage. I'm only doing this because I want it to be saved between web pages, and I've got storage for an access level. So I'm going to make sure I've got comments from each, and say holds current display name of logged in user. Okay, and this is going to be, remember it's just 3 slashes, current access level of logged in user. Okay, and that's it. So this storage space, you'll add to this if you think of any other things you want to persist, but I can't imagine there being much more. Okay.